So this is now episode number 16, and we are moving through with this title, Mahmad, Mahmad, Mahmad. We've seen it start with the Ugarites. We know that it's right through the Old Testament. We know it's Ambrose in the fourth century who actually refers to the Mahmad, the Old Testament Mahmad, the Messiah, and the Messiah who's to come, which who to come again the second time for the Christians would be Jesus Christ. And the seventh century Mahmad is well known within Christian circles as Jesus, the return of Jesus. That makes big sense and why it's on that coin that Muawiyah puts on, Muhammad there with the crosses on the other side of the coin. Famous coin. Now that makes sense. But we haven't really looked much at the Jewish side of it because the Jews also use this term, this praised one. And the Jews used it for their exilarchs. Now, Mel, what you're going to do, you're going to help us walk through and show that we've already gone through the succession of the exilarchs. You're going to show that these exilarchs were also seen as messiahs, and which would be therefore, that's why they would be referring to them as Mahmoud. So over to you. Help us with this. Show us what you're talking about, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll go straight into sharing the slides in a second now. All right, so I suppose the key thing today is just to confirm that Jewish people did actually believe that their exilarchs were messiahs. This is the crucial piece of the jigsaw. It's one thing to suppose that that's what was going on, but it's another thing to prove it. And so we do have actually direct evidence from Jewish writings of that very thing. So if we think back, earlier we saw it was claimed that Marzutra's successors, Marzutra being the exilarch that was killed by the Persians back in the early part of the 6th century, we said that his successors were the progenitors of the chain of Muhammad, so the key people being Nehemiah ben Huziel and his brother Salman, which are shown there on the picture. A.J. Jukes proposes that the so-called Rashidun, the rightly guided, are in fact Jewish leaders, simply renamed, given different biographies.
Mhm.
So, the key piece of evidence and source for this evidence is a book by David C. Mitchell called Messiah bin Joseph. And he's done an amazing bit of research over the last 20 or 30 years on an area that isn't really widely known outside of Jewish circles. And what he suggests that according to Jewish eschatology, before Messiah bin David comes, there would first be a Messiah bin Joseph who would gather the Jews in Israel, but who would be a suffering servant who would be ultimately killed, and by doing so atone for Israel. He's sometimes referred to as the shepherd rock and the rock that the builders rejected. Now, Christians are kind of familiar with these two separate concepts in terms of Jesus. We're all familiar with Jesus as the suffering servant and also as the returning Messiah at the end of time. But for Jews, they consider these as two separate individuals, which is, a bit strange for us as Christians to think of it that way. So Jews would be expecting first the Messiah bin Joseph to come along, who would be killed, and then later they would be expecting Messiah bin David to come along. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay. So if we look at Surah 61:6 here, we can see this messianic pair in action. Now, the Quran has got it all a bit confused. It presents Jesus as the Messiah 4 times, or the Mahmed, and then it refers to another one to come after him. So if we see there, it says, I mentioned when Jesus, the son of Mary, said, O children of Israel, indeed I am the messenger of Allah to you, confirming what came before me of the Torah, and bringing good tidings of a messenger to come after me, whose name is Ahmed. So Ahmed is just another word for Messiah, another word for Mahmed. And so we can see that this passage here has been influenced by that concept in Judaism of the messianic pair. So if Jesus, from the perspective of the Quran, is the Messiah bin Joseph, then they expect a Messiah bin David. So Ahmed is the equivalent of the Messiah bin David. All right. Now, we've got 4 different Jewish sources that refer to the belief that some exilarchs were the Messiah for them in the 7th century. And these are very early writings. They're actually written in the early part of the 7th century. So the first one we're going to look at is the Midrash Otot HaMashiach, or the Signs of the Messiah. We don't have the exact year it was written, but it was sometime between 617 AD, and which was the year of Ben Hushiel's death, and 638, the year of the Arab conquest of Jerusalem. So the key line for us is, it says, Messiah bin Joseph will appear, and his name is Nehemiah bin Huziel, and the rest doesn't really concern us. The key thing is they're identifying their exilarch, Nehemiah bin Huziel, as the Messiah bin Joseph, the first of the two Messiahs. So that's a hugely important piece of evidence. We also have the second one, Esherat Otot, Midrash of the 10 Signs. Similar dating, 617 to 634 AD. It says, in the 6th sign, it says, the Holy One, blessed be he, will produce at that time Messiah bin Joseph, whose name is Nehemiah bin Huziel. Now, it's written after the death of Nehemiah bin Huziel, but it's obviously presenting itself as if it's a prophecy of what will happen. Okay. The third one is Perke Hekalot Rabati, or the Great Palaces. Sections 38 to 40 is the key bit that we need. It's a messianic apocalypse. The text suggests that the Messiah bin David would appear around the year 654, which is during the reign of Exilarch Bostonay. So they're writing it long before that period, but they're guessing that that's when the second Messiah would come. So it says 40 years before Messiah bin David comes, whose name is Menahim bin Amiel, will come Nehemiah bin Huziel, a man of Ephraim bin Joseph, and he will stand forth in Jerusalem and cause all Israel to gather to him there. So that's our third reference to Nehemiah bin Huziel being a Messiah. Nehemiah bin Huziel became governor of Jerusalem in 614. So therefore, this writer expects Messiah bin David to appear in 654 AD. And then if we look at this here, we can see that Bostonay was the exilarch from 642 to 665. So that would place him as that Messiah bin David. So you can imagine that Jews that were waiting for this Messiah bin David, they would probably treat Bostonay as the Messiah, because his reign falls exactly in the middle of this time frame. And then finally, we have the book of Zerubbabel. David C. Mitchell tells us that the book was an important and influential work and was known in all the main centers of medieval Judaism. Several complete manuscripts of it and fragments survive. So who is Zerubbabel that this book refers to? He is the second exilarch who built the second temple around 516 BC, following the return of the Jews from the Babylonian exile. It was later enlarged and renovated by the Hasmoneans and Herod the Great. I don't know if you want to jump in at this stage, Jay, or should I go on?
I'm a little confused here. Why are you now jumping back to 516 BC if going through 615, 614? Why are you jumping back suddenly?
So in this apocalypse, what they're doing is they are putting a prophecy in the mouth of someone from the Old Testament. They're writing in the 7th century, and they're saying that this person from the Old Testament times is prophesying the Messiah in their century. That's
Okay,
what they're doing.
that's why.
It's a type of literary device that they use to kind of add gravitas to their writings, you know. So it's, from our perspective, we'd say, well, this is false, this is fiction, but you know, there's a bit of poetic license here. That's the way they're painting their current times. Okay, so that's who Zerubbabel is. And what is this book? The Midrash takes the form of a prophetic vision revealed to the biblical figure Zerubbabel ben Shealtiel, the second Babylonian exilarch, who in rabbinic thought is the same person as biblical Nehemiah, the governor of Jerusalem. There's obviously a parallel being seen between that Nehemiah from the Old Testament and the Nehemiah bin Huziel from the 7th century, and that's why they're using that guy as the person that's prophesying about the newer Nehemiah, who's the governor of Jerusalem from 614 to 617. So since this biblical exilarch was the ancestor of the exilarch governor Nehemiah bin Huziel, the meaning of the work becomes clear. The writer wishes his contemporaries to believe that the one who built the second temple foresaw his descendants, the sons of Huziel, building the third temple. That's the whole point. They're trying to say that the sons of Nehemiah bin Huziel are going to build the third temple. So you can imagine there's so much excitement now. The Messiah has arrived. They're going to now rebuild the temple. And of course, we know from our sources that one of the things that the Jews did when they conquered Jerusalem is to go to the Temple Mount and they start looking to see could they build the temple again. Of course, then what happens is Umar comes along and he kicks them off the mount and they start building some form of building for the Arabs to pray on instead. So that's the background to it. So this book was, again, like the other three, was written in the mid-30s. Mitchell says that the statement that Israel's salvation will come after 990 years from the founding of the Second Temple suggests that the author hoped for deliverance around 638 AD. Okay, so that's all I can say is that's Mitchell's estimation based on his reading of the text. Since he predicts that Armilus, that is Heraclius, will reign for 7 years and hopes for deliverance thereafter, it's likely that he is writing in the mid-630s. So this is before Umar has come into Jerusalem to conquer it. They're already expecting the deliverance in 638. That's the key year. That's probably what pushed them all on to reconquer Jerusalem in the late 630s as well. Okay. So the book identifies Nehemiah and seems to suggest his brother Shalom are the Messiahs. So it's definite about Messiah bin Joseph, and they are hinting that Messiah bin David is actually his brother Shalom. Okay. Now it's interesting from this paper that this diagram comes from. The Jewish writer proposes that Shalom, or the brother of Nehemiah, is actually the same person as Salman Farsi, who of course shows up in the standard Islamic narrative as the companion of Muhammad. Why is he the companion of Muhammad, you might ask? Well, it kind of makes sense. If you have a double Messiah, one of them is Messiah bin Joseph, that's Nehemiah. Then the other Messiah is Shalom. So that's where it starts. It starts in the Jewish mythology about these exilarchs, and then it morphs over time to become the first Messiah is now Muhammad, and the second one becomes his companion, who's called Salman al-Farsi. So that's the idea behind it. A little bit more from the text. It says, and he said to me, Messiah bin Joseph, that's Nehemiah, will gather all Israel as one man, and they will remain 4 years in Jerusalem and will offer sacrifices. He obviously gets killed after 4 years. That would match up with Nehemiah 6:14 to 6:17. It goes on to say, all the nations of the world will encamp behind this evil Satan Armilus, who's considered to be Heraclius, except Israel. All Israel will mourn Nehemiah bin Huziel, who was slain. His corpse will be thrown before the gate of Jerusalem, but the beasts and the birds will not touch it. It introduces the expectation of Messiah bin David. And he said to me, Menahem bin Amiel will come suddenly in the month of Nisan and stand on the valley of Arbel, and all the sages of Israel will go out to him. And bin Amiel will say to them, I am the Messiah whom the Lord has sent to announce good news to you and to save you from the hand of your enemies. The conclusion then really is the 4 separate Jewish writings confirm A.J. Juice's ideas that there was a belief in a chain of messiahs or Mahmeds in the 7th century. And in summary, these 4 separate Jewish writings confirm A.J. Juice's ideas about this chain of Muhammad's or Mahmed's in the 7th century. Nehemiah ben Huziel was the first. He was killed in 617. We can only imagine the Jewish reaction to that event. Probably what happened was after Shalom was a bit of a damn squid, didn't really conquer everything. They had to reinvent the mythology. Or maybe the next person is the Messiah, maybe the next person, and then it became a chain of people who they thought, oh, maybe this is the Messiah, and that's why we have the Chinese source that talks about a whole chain of these Moshu or Messiahs. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Jay.
Okay, so remember, just so we're all on the same page, we're trying to trace where these Mahmeds are, these titles of Messiah. Muhammad is the Messiah. Muhammad is Jesus Christ, the Messiah. But from the Christian perspective, we're now moving over to the Jewish perspective. And from the Jewish perspective, there is a lot of information. No one's looked at it before. That's why A.J. Dios is so important. Mel is taking it from A.J. Dios. And we have this David Mitchell fellow who is coming up and actually unpacking it for us. I don't think David Mitchell knew what we're looking for. He didn't realize the liaisons, but the dates really do fit. That's why this is exciting. When you look at see what's happening in the 7th century, see, remember, we're in the 7th century. We've asked for evidence from the 7th century. You've got to see what the Jews are doing there as well. Now, just to be fair, Mel, these Jews are all in what is today Iraq. Am I correct?
They're all over the place. They're a diaspora. So do you have some Jews in Israel, some are Iraq. They're in northern
Where are
Africa
the
as well.
exilarchs?
They're
Where
all
are the exilarchs? Where are they
the
living?
Exilarchs are in what we would call Baghdad today.
So that's Iraq. So remember, we're in the right area. We're in the
Yep.
place where Arabic is used. We're in the place where the word Muhammad would be used as the praise one. And so these exilarchs are taking on this title themselves in a Jewish context because they believe that this is the Messiah they're waiting for. And remember, this Messiah, the Jews are still waiting for it. They don't believe he has yet to come, but they really are hoping for him. And so when you go back to what Mitchell has done, David Mitchell has gone back to look and he sees that there are really two messiahs that are coming. Am I correct, Mel? One would be the suffering servant Messiah, and the other one would be the victorious Messiah.
Yeah, the first one would be referred to as Messiah bin Joseph. The second one is called Messiah bin David.
Two messiahs. We see that from Isaiah, the whole Isaiah account of chapter 53, as all encompassing being part of what Jesus did. He came to suffer, and of course, he will come again as in a victory yet to come in the second coming. But the Jews do it as two completely different individuals coming separate from each other. Now, what Mitchell has done and what A.J. Dios has picked up and what you're going with is that you can follow these through. You can follow that they thought this was happening in the 7th century. And you can see this with this Nehemiah ben Hushiel, who they believe was the Ben Joseph, the first one, the suffering one, and that his brother then would be Shalom, who would be the one that would be the Ben David, the one, the second Messiah. And to back that up, you went back to Zerubbabel way back in the 500s BC, where this is referred to that the second temple built by him, there will be a third temple built by this Messiah that is going to come. All the Jews in the 7th century thought, this is it. This is it. It must be this guy because he would be the suffering servant. His brother would be the victorious one. As you said, that didn't happen. Shalom looked like a damp squid. And so as a result of that, they had to keep naming others and others who come after. And so that's why you're still, the hope is there. The hope is there that the one that will come finally will be the Messiah who will then destroy the enemies and bring back the third kingdom or the third temple. So I'm assuming now, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I think people have been wondering, why are we looking so much at the Jewish side? Because the Jews are very much also part and parcel of what's happening, what then the Arabs then take. They are taking this Messiah, since both the Christians and the Jews are looking for the Messiah, one a second time, the other the first time. The Arabs naturally want to then be part of the party. They want to be
Yeah,
also part of it. That's why they want to say, we've got the Muhammad, we've got the
yeah.
final one. And by the 8th and 9th century, they assume and they put it back to this guy, but they don't put him up in Baghdad. They don't put him in Jerusalem for obvious reason, because that's the Jews and the Christians have too much history there. They want their own prophet from the Ishmaelite clan, not from Isaac. They want their own prophet, who is the greatest, the final, the one who brings the final revelation, who will then bring that which corrects that which has gone before. So they put him into Mecca down in the 8th
Yeah.
century, in a
You
completely
can
different place.
you can imagine when the Jews are going around saying, "We've got the Messiah ben Joseph now, and we've got the Messiah ben David." You can see that in the 660s when they start putting Mahmed on the coins, the Christians are snubbing their nose and saying, "No, no, no, the Messiah is Jesus," because they put the cross like not just once, maybe 3 times on the coins with Mahmed. So they're basically saying, "No, no, no, we own the Mahmed. We have the Messiah, not you." So you can see that there's an argument there between the Jews and the Christians.
That's
They're
the
arguing about
debate going on right there. Isn't that
right
fascinating?
there.
Because
Yeah.
you look and see who minted that coin. That is Muawiyah. He's in Damascus. The Jews are
Yeah.
in Baghdad. There's all this rivalry between, or Ctesiphon at that time, it wasn't called Baghdad then. So you have this rivalry going on between those in Iraq and those in Syria, and the Christians are in Syria. They have the real Mahmed. Now it makes sense why they put not one, not two, but 3 different crosses on the front side. And look at the back side. I'm going to put it right here, and then a cross above the M, and there's the Mahmed below. We've got the Mahmed. This now we're starting to see this is a rivalry that's going on between the
Yeah.
Christians and the Jews.
It also makes sense why Muawiyah would put a cross at the beginning of inscriptions as well. So he
There
wasn't
you
just
go.
on the coins. It all makes sense now. We can see now why, when it describes Muawiyah going to Jerusalem, he goes to pray in Golgotha. He goes visit all the important places for Christians. That would make no sense if he was a Muslim. It makes
Absolutely.
more sense now. You know.
And he never goes to Mecca. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah.
The one place,
Yeah.
if he was a Muslim, he should go. He goes to Jerusalem. He's a good Christian because he knows that that's where the pilgrimages are. That's where all the Christians went, and the Jews do as well. But not any Muslim. Muslims do not go to Jerusalem for their pilgrimage. This is all great stuff. Now, next, what we were going to do, I think, in the next episode, we're going to look at the whole thing with the Hijrah. What and where did that come from, and where did the dates go wrong, and what exactly, how did that come about? And then after that, we're going to summarize everything. We're going to put it all together so you can all make sense of it. Because I'm hearing a lot of people are saying, too much information again. Mel's throwing and pouring. He's like a spigot, or he's like a water hydrant. He's just pulling out all this stuff that's going all over the place. How do we make sense of it, folks? We're going to do that. In this is number 16, so that will probably be number 18. So hold on. We are going to get there. We're going to make sense of it all so that you can use this. God bless you, Mel. Thanks so much for doing that. And also for those who have helped you, like AJ Dios and the others. It's so great. Now there's David Mitchell, who's come on board as well. I wonder if I'm related to him because I'm from the Mitchell clan as well. Anyways, until next time, this is Mel and Jay, thousands of miles apart, coming to you. Put in your comments. Over and out.